Hi, I'm Ian Stantz. I'm an associate professor of English, creative writing, all that. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. What a nice crowd we have. If you haven't already, which you probably have, but if you haven't, please make sure that your cell phones are silenced at this point. This is the second of three events under the banner of the Axton Reading Series. And in case you don't know, the Axton Reading Series was established in 1999 through the generosity of the late William Axton, former UofL English professor, and his wife, the late Anne Axton. This series brings together highly distinguished writers from across the country. They come to UofL for 2-day visits to read from their work and to share their knowledge and expertise with the university and the Louisville community. That's us. I am very, very, very happy to welcome tonight's guest. Hannah Pittard is the Guy M. Davenport Professor of English at the University of Kentucky, a MacDowell and Ragdale Fellow, and a winner of the Amanda Davis Highwire Fiction Award. She is the author of 6 books, including the memoir, We Are Too Much, which I know some of you are very familiar with, and the novels Listen to Me, Invisible Empire, and most recently, If You Love It, Let It Kill You, among a couple others. I know Hannah a little bit through personal interactions. We've crossed paths at a literary event or two, maybe. But I mostly know her through her work. And this is an important distinction, especially perhaps when talking about a writer who trucks in both memoir and what is commonly referred to as autofiction. That is fiction that freely borrows and plays with notions of the writer's actual life. These works, both the novel and memoir form, invite us or even dare us to conflate the author and the main players in the story. They seduce us into collapsing together these different parties. We may be comfortably reading a memoir, like the memoir on that table back there, forgetting for a moment that the words kind of follow the words a memoir. And we feel that we are really getting to know the facts of this writer's life. Nonfiction, right? When suddenly we're reading an extended, imagined conversation right in the middle of the book. Imagined, like, fiction. Or perhaps a novel's protagonist's bio bears a striking resemblance to the author, or even shares a name with the author, though maybe the spelling is just a little different, prompting, as it did for me, a double take and a double check of the front cover. We might, for instance, after reading tonight's guest's latest novel, think back and say to ourselves, oh, I couldn't believe when Hannah, Hannah Pittard, did such and such. But wait, was it Hannah, or was it Hana, Hannah, who did that? But spelling aside, surely this character, who is a writer and teaches creative writing in Lexington, Kentucky, is the same as the author, a writer who teaches creative writing in Lexington, Kentucky. Yes, absolutely. This is simply a thinly veiled autobiography. But what then are we to do with the talking cat? What is a poor reader to believe? It is safest to remember that the book is the book and the writer is the writer, and these are not the same thing, except when they are, or they might be, or something. But I wonder if, keeping in mind this admittedly non-committal caveat, we still might think of books, our guest book, for instance, in terms we more associate with the people we meet in the real world. A book we might say is smart. Another we might describe as funny or thoughtful or even sweet. There are books we miss after we turn the last page, books we want to revisit again and again. It's been too long, we might say of a favorite novel or poetry collection, just as we might an old roommate. When reading and rereading a few of Hannah Pittard's books in preparation for tonight, several times I had the thought, this book is a good hang. They are the book versions of the people you want to spend time with. Intelligent, funny, surprising, self-deprecating. They move lightly and often wryly through the world, but aren't afraid of earnestness when the moment is right. They are, as the New York Times puts it, dishy. And isn't that something we all want in a hang, even if we don't always want to admit it? They don't hold back on the juicy bits, even while they are simultaneously incisive literary works. Hannah's books are also formally inventive, often fragmented, frequently built out of carefully crafted simulacrums of human thought and interpersonal interactions. They put on an easygoing surface while plumbing the complexities of contemporary relationships, professional ambition, sex, writing, and myriad other topics. Publishers Weekly writes that if you love it, let it kill you, quote, brims with quick wit. Author Kevin Wilson says that this novel is, quote, neither a comedy nor a tragedy, but something much worse, real life. Ron Charles of the Washington Post writes that Pittard allows us to, quote, see the splintered timbers of her experience clearly enough to recognize our own. And Emily St. John Mandel says that if you love it, let it kill you is, quote, exquisitely sharp, very funny, moving, and strange in the best possible way. In other words, it is a good hang. Hannah's books are books you want to play poker with. You want to get a platter of oysters with these books. You want them to maybe do a guest spot on your YouTube channel. Or maybe, if you're lucky, you might convince them to drive a few hours to be a part of your reading series. And I'm happy that that happened tonight. So please help me welcome Hannah Pittard.
I have a couple fellowship applications coming up, and now I know who I would like to write my recommendations. Thank you in advance. You'll be getting an email shortly after this reading. Also, that is such a good intro. Like, I always have to remember what happens when you have a good writer introduce you. It's humbling, and then also you think, am I going to live up to that? I don't know. Also, I just want to make sure that I can see. Yeah, I can see you. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm not going to list everyone's names, but I'm really happy to be here. And especially thank you for the grad students who just read my memoir. I will say this. I do truck in, what was I accused of trucking in? I love truck as a verb.
Memoir and
I do truck. Yes, I truck. I'm a trucker. I will say about this imagined, so my memoir has in the middle part is an imagined conversation, which you would think is fiction, and it is fiction, potentially an imagination is, but I would have left off the kind of in my title of my memoir, but sometimes you don't get to choose things like that. Your publisher or your editor pushes really strongly in a certain direction, and finally in the 9th hour you have to let it go. But I would say this about the middle section. It is as real as I could have made the experience of being with my brain post-divorce. And when I had those thoughts, I was truly trying to exhibit to the reader what my fantasies and brain and imagination was doing in that moment. So on the one hand, it is imagined, which means it's fiction, but on the other hand, it is absolutely me. I was trying to expose myself and make vulnerable to the reader how difficult it is after being with someone for so long that they do not immediately 86 themselves from your thought process. And so I would find myself walking the dog. I would find myself alone in my house that had once been my husband's house and my house. And I would think of him and I would have these conversations. And so those conversations that I had were very real to me, even though I completely made them up. I'm going to take this off because I'm a little bit hot. I'm over 40. Everyone's talking about, boy, does my mom like perimenopause as this whole thing. My mom's just like, everyone right now in the 21st century thinks that they've invented perimenopause. And she's like, it's been going on for ages. And I'm like, yes, Mom, I do know that. Speaking of mothers. Okay, so I'll read a little bit. How long should I read? I forgot to ask this very important part so that we could talk. I love talking to writers and people who are willing to sit here and listen to me.
20 to 30.
Let's not freak them out. Okay, yeah, okay, right on. Cool. So you've got all night. So I'm just going to read. I've never read from the first chapter. There's typically this one chapter that I read from that functions very independently, very nicely. It was published in the Swanee Review. And so I often read from that, but I've read from it so many times, I'm just a little bit sick of it. So I thought I would read from the very first chapter. That way if there are people perhaps interested in buying the book, you'll find out if you want to still buy it. And if you're reading it, I don't give anything away. So this is chapter 1, Nice to Meet You, Please Take Care of Me, is what it's called. That's about as earnest as she gets in the entire novel. Nice to meet you, please take care of me. Today I am restless. I text my friend Jane from the bathroom. It's a Sunday, early fall, the day of my nephew's 6th birthday party. Yesterday was his actual birthday. I made 3 varieties of mac and cheese from scratch. He informed me a few hours before dinner and later made good on the threat that he would be eating none of them. I let his littlest brother pick the pasta shape instead. Wagon wheel. That was last night. Now I'm in the bathroom, mine and the bald man's with whom I share my bed. It's on the 2nd floor of our house. I'm watching my father, 80 this year, park his orange Mini in front of the neighbor's house across the street. My sister and her family live 1 house down from there. Her backyard is where the party is happening. 1 week ago, Jane called to tell me that my ex had written me into his debut novel. He means to keep it a secret, she said. From me? I asked. From the world, she said. He means to keep it a secret, she said. From the world, I asked. Only from you, she said. Is it bad? Is it bad? I asked. I don't like it, she said. You don't like the book? I asked. I don't like your portrayal, she said. How am I? Smug, she said. Insecure. Well, if I were an angry and unsatisfied man, that's exactly how I'd describe a woman with ambition too, I said. Jane said, you've got the hang of this already. You'll be fine. I explained the situation to my boyfriend, the bald man. I told him that my ex had written me into his novel, one allegedly about our toddler of a marriage and his affair with my dear friend. Why a secret? I asked. Why from me? My boyfriend shrugged. Maybe because you've written a memoir about the very same toddler? I shook my head, but that's not a secret. He said, going into this relationship, I thought I was the only one with shared custody. He is referring to his daughter, the 11-year-old, who lives half her life with her mother and half her life with us. I'm sorry, I said. Writers, he said, with not a little bit of disgust, before leaving the room. There's a bounce house at my sister's house and lots of booze. I haven't seen the booze yet. I'm still in a bathroom on the other side of the street. But I saw the bounce house earlier when my boyfriend helped my sister move a tiny desk from her garage attic to the 6-year-old's bedroom. The desk is what? A gift, maybe? There wasn't supposed to be a bounce house, but my sister caved. Everyone knew she would cave, including the 6-year-old, so there were never any tantrums. Earlier this week, my sister sent an announcement regarding the bounce house. When I showed my boyfriend, he said he'd never before seen an amended birthday invite for a little kid. I suggested anticipated attendance must be down, which was a joke. because my sister's boys have birthday parties that rival your best New Year's Eve. I'm sitting atop a small white storage container, inside which are spare razors, spare toilet paper rolls, spare soap bars, spare bandages, spare liter bottles of shampoo, spare bags of cotton balls, and I'm waiting for Jane to respond. I'm lamenting life, I text. Jane is a Shakespearean and lives 1.2 miles away in a house that gets great light. Last week, after getting off the phone with her, I Googled my ex-husband for the first time in 7 years. I was hoping for more news of his clandestine novel. In doing so, I accidentally discovered a story he'd written in which I'd been knifed to death by a homeless man. For several years, I've been walking around with no idea. I liked my ending, which was dramatic but without fuss. The homeless man gets in several quick jabs, all of them meaningful. There's no chance of recovery. I told my boyfriend that he and I had been turned into characters in a story by my ex. We're married, I said. Only in our hearts, he said. Your name is Bruce, I told him. He nodded. I like that. Do I still have a daughter? You do, I told him. Good, he said. And I'm still bald? It's unstated. I like being bald. I did not tell him that I'd been murdered, and he did not think to ask. My boyfriend husband, I'll borrow the name Bruce, has been part of my family for only 5 years. He is still learning our rope tricks. When my mother calls, for instance, I ask her immediately, have you fallen off a horse? Are you feeling sick? Have you gotten a diagnosis? Are you trapped in the attic again? Do you have intentions of climbing a tree while tied to a chainsaw? In this family, if you don't ask the right questions, you don't get all the information. Jane texts, restless how? Lamenting what? Say more. I sent her a picture of the spider plant in the corner of my bathroom and several dozen of its babies, whose roots are soaking in jam jars I've crammed along the windowsill. Jane, who, like me, is childless by choice, writes, Freudian. I'd be sitting on and texting from the lip of my clawfoot bathtub if I could, but it's fiberglass, and I'd dislodge the water supply lines were I ever to put any sort of weight on it. When Bruce and I bought 3 years ago, we assumed the bathtub was original to the house, 1927, which means I assumed the tub was cast iron and coated in porcelain. You spend 45 minutes in what will likely be the most outrageous purchase of your life. You have no idea what you're getting. I've spent more time looking at jeans online today than I spent in this house before deciding to buy it. Today I am lamenting life, I told Bruce first thing this morning when we woke up yet again before sunrise. He said, is this an all-day activity? I said, intermittent, I think. Then we had a quick fight about his early departure from the mac and cheese dinner. Dishes had been cleared, monologues had begun. He slapped his knees, popped up from the table, and said he was tired and therefore going home. Bruce's daughter also popped up, declaring her own fatigue. She didn't clear her napkin or her water glass, and I didn't notice until after she and her father had already left. I didn't want to stay at my sister's house and hear any more monologues, but even less did I want to leave as some sort of family unit in which groupthink and joint decisions might appear the dominant mood. My ex wants to keep secrets, and I want to confess. I have never been pregnant. I do not like children. I am surrounded by family. I often lie in bed at night and think, when they are dead, I will... ... I have an oral fixation. I dislike most people. I am tired of men. I am fascinated by the simplicity of erect penises. I am haunted by my childhood. I am living too much in the iterative tense, I text Jane. The iterative what? She asks, playing dumb for my benefit. The tense of routine, I write. She responds with a picture of her entryway. The sun across her floor is disgusting. Outside, my father is still in his Mini, the driver's side door wide open. I consider taking a picture, then decide against it. He's on a call. This parked car, door open, speakerphone on, is his preferred mode of doing business. I send a text to my mother saying that her first ex-husband is already here and that she should stop by my house for a quick glass of wine before heading to the birthday party. My sister and I, and our mother, and our father, we all live in Kentucky now. It's a long story, but I moved here first, years ago, and with my ex. We never intended to stay. But now he is gone, and my family is here. FOMO, my mother said when she heard of my father's decision to move to Lexington last year. I divorced him 40 years ago and moved out of state only to have him show up in my backyard, not a mile from the place I'll likely die. Bruce has spent the better part of the morning grumbling about my nephew's shindig. He'd rather stay home and reread Beloved, which he'll be teaching next week. Like me, Bruce is a professor of English, Americanist. Jane is also a professor of English, as is her husband, Teddy, another Shakespearean. I zoom in on Jane's entryway. I text, "That's a gorgeous rug. Is it new?" My immediate neighbor, a professor of mathematics, is walking down his driveway whistling. I'm watching him and am thrilled to witness the precise moment when his whistling stops and he becomes aware of the giant man in a cowboy hat sitting in an orange Mini parked in the wrong direction on the opposite side of the street having a loud conversation. My neighbor is north of 70 himself. I see my father see my neighbor. If there is a standoff, my father will win. His entitlement isn't just willful, it's pathological. Entitlement is the wrong word anyway. Better to say, he is notably undeterred by the environment around him. I've always been an inquisitive, even nosy person. Eavesdropping on the conversations of strangers is among my favorite hobbies. But it wasn't until Bruce and I moved into this house, and I began paying very special attention to the math professor, his wife, and their 4 adult children, all of whom live at home, that I purchased a pair of binoculars for outright spying. Actually, I purchased 2 pairs. Bruce sometimes joins me. The fact that he will occasionally turn off all the downstairs lights and call quietly up to me in my attic office and tell me to come down fast because the neighbors are acting curiously. The fact that he will crouch next to me as we skulk from window to window, trying to get a better view of them. Well, that he tolerates, even encourages this proclivity speaks volumes about our relationship and the reasons it persists. Plus, there is the house. We are each separately in love with its brick walls and its wraparound porch. We have more columns than anyone else on the street, including my sister. Last week, Bruce's students told him that he talks about me a lot. A student we share, Camille, told the class that I did the same. This delighted his students. He told them we talk about each other so much because we still like one another, which can't be said of all couples. I asked him if his assertion amused or terrified his students. There's a steep learning curve for students in Lexington between the ages of 18 and 22. Some seem as though they've known since childhood that life is an unkind joke to be fretted over dusk to dawn, while others appear to believe their parents have never regretted a single decision. By way of an answer, he said, "It's the Faulkner class." I text Jane, "I'm desperately looking for small secrets to distract me from this brewing unhappiness. Yesterday, it was a pair of Spanish leather boots that, when they arrive, I will tell Bruce I've owned since boarding school. Today, it's indoor plants, which, when he notices them a week from now, I will say have been inside since June." She texts back immediately, "Boarding school strains credulity." I write, "Grad school then?" She writes, "You had money in grad school?" I write, "Credit cards and debt?" I send her a link to the Spanish boots. Bruce and I have been married in our hearts since last year, about an hour and a half before his first colonoscopy. Because we aren't legally married, the kindly young man at check-in was resistant to my status as emergency contact. The state of Kentucky takes its marriage laws and hospital forms quite seriously. Things got heated, and Bruce, tall, broad-shouldered, originally from Decatur, Illinois, and not a little unscary when he's nervous or angry, declared loudly, "Sir, we are married in our hearts, sir." After a beat, the young man, he was wearing mascara, blushed and pushed the clipboard in my direction. "Just write wife," he whispered. While Bruce stared coldly at the wall in front of him, I wrote wife next to my name and tried for an air of contrition. It's my fault we're not married. Several years ago, after my divorce, after my husband, then still a colleague, cheated on me with the woman, my dear friend, who'd originally introduced us, a graduate student of mine suggested that if things ever got serious with another person, I ought to keep it weird. My student hadn't kept it weird. She was married with a daughter, but she seemed to have a firm and honest grasp on her situation as wife and mother, as well as on the incongruities of the world. She once handed in a story to workshop in which a mermaid was roasted over an open fire and served to guests as a delicacy. I was very much in the market for advice from interesting, clear-eyed, and absurd-minded women. I adopted hers with fervor. About the time my ex was killing me in his fiction, I was explaining to Bruce that while I wanted to buy a house with him and was even willing to help raise his daughter, I did not want to be married to him or anyone else ever again. I wanted to keep it weird. By keeping it weird, I assumed, naively, that I could skirt off official role of stepmother, a title I've despised ever since my father married a deeply sadistic architect when I was 10 years old. My hope was that despite living with Bruce's daughter half of every week, despite making extravagant dinners for her and cutting out giant hand-stenciled letters on her birthday and at the end of every school year, I'd somehow continue to exist merely as the eccentric, childless girlfriend who happened to own 50% of a house with her father. All semester, I have been pestering my students about the perils of abstraction, but now I text Jane. It's not a desire for infidelity or even something romantic outside the relationship, but it's parallel. When I'm not writing, I feel utterless. Instead, my brain is lustful for otherness without feeling actual lust and honestly despising, even fearing the actuality of otherness. I reread my text. Then I write, rudderless. She writes, my Freudian hackles are up, up, up. I write, basically, by the way, when my boyfriend, whose name is not Bruce, but sometimes I call him Bruce to my students, when he read this, he was like, he knows who Jane is. He was like, Jane is really funny. And I thought that he was like kind of crushing on Jane at that moment. And I was like, I wrote this whole book. Jane said none of this. All of that's me. Everything is me. And he was like, yeah, but she's pretty funny. And I was like, I'm funny. Okay, guy? I'm funny. He was like, but I can totally see her saying that. And I was like, because I am brilliant. Thank you. You're on my side. I write, basically, I'm aware of my domestication and would like 1 week as a wolf caterwauling at the moon, after which I'd likely be happy as a quokka for several more years. Before Jane can ask, I send a screenshot of a smiling pint-sized marsupial with a hashtag quokka selfie. She sends me, you should look this up sometime, the quokkas are so cute, they're like they smile. She sends me a picture of her guest bedroom / office. The sunlight is obscene. I search my archive, then send a photo of our new dining room table. She writes, talk about strong rug game, is that new? Then she says, Teddy likes it too. And I wonder if she is signaling that we are not alone. I know about signaling via text. Jane and I are not lovers. We just have a sympathetic view of life's illogicalities. Jane knows that my lamentations have at least something to do with my ex and his book, but neither of us is tedious enough to say so. I sent her a picture of my office attic, which I've recently rearranged. In a single photograph, there is a stuffed barracuda, a zebra rug, several skulls, a 17th century rug, an Art Deco mirror, the skeleton of a piranha, and a ship's captain's chair. All of it inheritance from my mother who, about 5 years ago, decided to stop buying gifts and start giving away her possessions. Jane writes, you're a bohemian. I write, in my heart, I am a mid-century minimalist. She writes, can anyone with a child in her life be a minimalist? I write, can anyone with any kind of person? Early on, things with Bruce's daughter were fine. If I was, say, standing behind her when the UPS man knocked and she opened the door, she'd shove her thumb over his shoulder in my direction and say, that's not my mother. I'd say without hesitation, and that's not my daughter. When her father wasn't in the room, she'd sometimes sidle up to me and whisper, apropos of nothing, I'll never kiss you, never ever. That's good, I'd whisper back, because I don't want to be kissed by you ever, ever. But now, 3 years later, she seeks me out while I am in the kitchen cooking dinner. She kisses my arm, she hugs my waist, she smiles whenever I make eye contact. She plays my favorite Guy Clark songs and sings along with me, especially during LA Freeway. She beams when I go loud about the landlord. Son of a bitch has always bored me. Recently, as if to spook me, she said out of nowhere, you're basically my mom. With fear in my heart and a knife in my hand, I said, no. You have a mother, and it is not me. She said, yeah, but basically. 3 kids tumble out of the giant SUV that's pulled momentarily into our driveway. A mother scuttles after them. The driver, presumably the father, backs up and pulls away. Is he looking for parking or going home? I tag the picture of Jane's spare bedroom and write, "Such a gift," which is a joke between us, a nod to our students who traffic in canned language and hackneyed expressions. My mother texts, "Can I park in your driveway?" I give it a thumbs up. Then I snap a quick photo of the street below, crowded with my sister's guest cars and my father's Mini, whose driver's side door is shut now. How did I miss him shambling inside? He's had 2 hip replacements, but he still walks 4 miles a day. My mother still runs. A few days ago, my father called me, weeping. He wanted to talk about my mother and their divorce, now 4 decades in the past. "I'm sorry for everything," he said. "No more talk of the divorce," I said. "No more childhood. No more apologies. You promised." "I feel things," he said. "I feel things more than most people. I'm busy," I said. "I hate days like this," he said. "I didn't sleep worth a turd last night. I'm an emotional guy, you know." "I've got class," I told him. "I can't do this right now." "Do you think I could hurt myself?" "Your sister thinks I could hurt myself. I left my guns with her this morning." "I'm hanging up now," I say. "Is that all right?" "Criminal," he moans. "This is criminal." In the background, I heard the slosh of water. "Are you in the tub right now?" I asked. "Are you taking a bath? Are you calling me from the bathtub again? We talked about this." "I can't get the water hot enough," he says. "I'm creaky all over and I can't get it hot enough. My regular masseuse isn't answering." "I have to go," I said. "I'm sorry." Before I could disconnect, my father hung up on me, which is how he ends every phone call with anyone ever. And he texted my brother, "Your sister is a heartless woman." My brother sent me a screenshot of the text with a thumbs up emoji followed by a winking smiley face. I sent him the middle finger. My brother lives in Denver and runs 100-milers and says things like, "My body is my temple." He is universally adored, and he'll never move east. I open the door to my bathroom slowly, as though I am an intruder, as though I am up to no good and desperate not to be discovered. The sensation of sneaking, of pretending to sneak, is infinitesimal and divine. The bedroom lights are off. There's a mountain of laundry needing to be sorted and folded that's strewn across the bed, my bed, our bed, the bed I share with the bald man. The laundry makes me want to throw myself onto the rug and bang my fists against the floor until there are bruises. Instead, I burrow face down into the pile of clean clothes and throw a quiet make-believe tantrum. This, too, offers a sliver of ecstasy. I am not alone in this house, but there is no one in the world who has any inkling about my immediate whereabouts and activities. "Don't let the cat out of the bag," I say to myself in a gravelly voice. "Joke's on you," myself says back. "There is no cat." Last night, when I finally came home from my sister's, Bruce and his daughter were in the basement watching a show, and I embarked on a one-sided Cold War in the kitchen. I ground the morning coffee beans, finished the dishes, put away a few of the heavier pots and pans, then started the dishwasher, which sometimes produces a loud whooshing noise through the pipes closest to the television's speaker. Later still, in bed, Bruce asked how mad I was. On a scale of 1 to 5, he said, "Mad at you?" I asked. "Yeah, how mad at me are you?" I said, "Not mad at you, mad at life." I had to look away so he wouldn't see me smile. Even later, I pushed him onto his side and curled up behind him. In the morning, I informed him of my restlessness. My mother texts, "Can you please unlock your side door and let me in? Glass of wine?" I'm still upstairs, still buried in clean laundry, so Bruce beats me to the door. But I'm in the kitchen by the time he says to her, "One good fact. What insect produces milk more nutritious than a cow's?" She hands me a bottle of white wine. "Open that?" To Bruce, she says, "An insect?" Bruce pulls out her regular chair. She lives a half a mile from us, and says, "A roach!" She says, "That's vile. Your street looks like a parking lot for the Keeneland racetrack." As of this morning, more than 70 people had RSVP'd for this kid's party. I hand the unopened bottle of wine to Bruce. He swaps it for one from our Sub-Zero. For the next 30 minutes, I clean and chop vegetables while Bruce and my mother argue politics and Shakespeare. My mother was once a high school English teacher. We finished the bottle. Last night, after pushing Bruce onto his side, I didn't sleep. I concentrated on my pillow, which is foam and has 2 cutouts for either ear depending on which side I'm sleeping. It resembles the head of a hammerhead shark. Without the pillow, I get earaches. At first, we tried a mouth guard. By we, I mean my dentist and me, but this was also in the era of my ex. He and I had just moved to Kentucky. In Chicago, where we used to live and teach, the earaches had gotten so bad that there were tests, then x-rays, then MRIs. The Kentucky dentist was amused that no one in Chicago had considered a solution so simple as a mouth guard. For the first few months, the months when my ex and I were our happiest, which preceded the months and then the years when we were our unhappiest, I'd wake up having slept like a kid koala, only to realize I'd dislodged the bite guard sometime during the night. Mornings, I'd search the bedroom to find it. Sometimes it was under the bed, sometimes it was on the bathroom counter, sometimes it was between the mattress and the box spring. Often it was under my pillow. One night, I didn't dislodge the mouth guard, and that was the last time I've ever been able to sleep without wearing it. The earaches didn't go away. Eventually, my husband did. About the time Bruce and I bought this jewel of a house, I discovered the online world of TMJ pillows. My mother says, you know how when you're surfing the web, you sometimes get a pop-up and the doctor in the ad asks if you want to cure your toe fungus? I sputter and wine escapes my nose. Bruce says, what are you talking about? My mother says, I'm going to have all my toenails removed. I leave the room, and Bruce, as I am making a note of my mother's exchange on a legal pad, says, you know she's writing this down, right? My mother calls out with real panic, if you give me toe fungus, I will never forgive you. I will leave the Rolex to your sister. I walk back into the kitchen and give my mother a look to indicate that I have no idea what she's talking about. My sister, with the sixth sense of a platypus, texts, I can see Mom's car. Where are you guys? Here are 3 things I am envious of. Jane's sunlit entryway, her box beam ceilings, and the fact that there is no child in her life. Bruce says, as I moodily clean up vegetable debris, you're milking your life's lament. My mother says, oh, is she depressed? I say, I guess I think I'm sad, which is something one of Bruce's students said, an expression that floored us both for its vulnerability. Now, a year later, we say it to each other as an inside joke. There are lots of inside jokes between us, sayings whose origins sometimes predate our status as a couple. Last week, what did I say as we accidentally ran the red light? I said, we don't have time to obey the law. Bruce echoed me, laughing, then said, what's that from? And I told him about my first boyfriend, who once ran a stop sign on his way back to our apartment, and I said out of nowhere, my voice a high-pitched cartoon, we don't have time to obey the law. The phrase stuck. We used it together for 6 years. Maybe he and I share its custody. My mother tells us she is looking for her soulmate or someone to take her for a glass of wine. We'll drink with you anytime, Bruce assures her. Have wine with us. Yes, my mother says mildly, but you drink in sweatpants. I'd like someone to get fancy for. Currently, she has 3 boyfriends, but they are all online and they are all in different states. The ski instructor is pushy, she says, and I encourage her to cut him off. To the retired army man, she texts a photo of the bottle of Haute Medoc Bruce opened. His reply is instant. I don't like Medoc. I encourage her to cut him off too. There is also a Canadian, but my mother says little about him, and I haven't yet thought to ask. My father is also looking for his soulmate. He placed his ad in the newspaper, print edition, old school style. Adventurous, tall, dapper gentleman seeks a female companion. My father was proud of the ad and shared it with me eagerly. I shared it with my brother, who was intrigued by his approach to capitalization. I noted that female companion, the ostensible purpose behind the ad, hadn't measured up. Everything else is capitalized. Adventurous, tall, dapper, gentleman, seeks, and then woman, not. My mother remarried first. When she finally introduced us to the man, dinner at a restaurant, he opened his mouth to reveal a chunk of bright orange cheese he'd pressed against his tongue. The second time we met him, lunch at the same restaurant, my mother told us they were getting married. I was 8. He had thinning blonde hair and was overweight. His younger sister had been the first Jewish debutante in Atlanta. I was skeptical that this doughy man with a penchant for soft cheese could have anything to do with a debutante, much less with my mother. The man who would become my stepfather hated 2 things: people who hated Jews and the fact that he was Jewish. Jewish by birth, he'd say to me when I was older, atheist by grace of God. He'd been married once before. They'd had no children. He didn't drink. I met his father on a handful of occasions. He'd been an extra in Driving Miss Daisy, and before that, in real life, his father had been an important and prominent lawyer. He'd had several wives. He was a man who didn't especially like children. By the time I met my stepfather's father, he was already dying of cancer. From my stepfather, I learned to be observant and dismissive, cynical and dishonest. I am not looking for my soulmate, in part because I have Bruce, and in part because I disagree with the category, akin as it is to vampires and talking kittens, both of which are favorite subjects of my undergrads every fall. I regularly assure Bruce that I am like neither of my parents. When he is gone, as in dead, I will not be looking for someone to replace him. You're it, I like to say. Never again after you. Please stop imagining your life when I'm dead, he says to me. And so I do not tell him of all the improvements I make each night as I lie awake in bed next to him and fantasize about my life in our house alone. I do not tell him about the plunge pool or the mud room or the tile roof or the slate-floored entryway. I certainly do not tell him about the Saarinen table in Verdi Alpi, which, by the way, is 25% off right now at Design Within Reach, which is still not within my reach, but I do get the emails, or the wishbone chairs he'd find so uncomfortable. Also, there is Theo, the mailman, on whom I've developed a crush in the 3 years since Bruce and I have lived together. I could say it is a platonic crush, but that would be wrong and serve only the purpose of protecting Bruce's feelings, and he is perfectly aware of my own towards the mailman. Theo is somewhere between 6.5 and 7 feet tall. He is black and has a beautiful bald head. There is another mailman, Oscar, who is also black, also bald, and classically more beautiful than Theo, but Oscar is not my crush. It is not Oscar who honks the horn of the U.S. mail van and waves at me when he sees me running and far from home. It is not Oscar who compliments the smell of my cooking as he wedges the day's catalogs into the mail slot. It is Theo. Last month, while I was replacing a hinge on the front door, Theo stopped to admire my handiwork. "Damn, girl," he said, shaking his head. "Is there anything you can't do?" It is hard not to consider Theo. Bruce and I didn't have sex last night. I was tired. Also, I was mad. Now I show my sister's plea for our company to my mother and Bruce. He says, "When my daughter was little, there weren't random family members hanging around at birthday parties." My mother says, "Speak it, Othello." I go upstairs to tell the 11-year-old who's reading a book while sitting up in bed that we're heading to my sister's. "You look like Alice James," I say. She primly tucks an edge of blanket under her thigh. "I resemble that remark," she says. Sometimes, offhandedly, when talking to her friends, the 11-year-old will refer to me as one of her parents. Sometimes, to my face, she'll flat out call me her stepmother, and I will remember all over again how wrong I was to imagine that marriage has anything to do with the love a child feels for a grown-up. At the same time, I will look at her with absolute dread, worrying at her large and open heart, wondering at her capacity for and willingness to be vulnerable. When I was her age, I locked myself in the bathroom because I didn't want to go to the court-mandated psychiatrist. I tore lines in my skin with a ballpoint pen to distract myself from the headaches I got from crying so hard. I kept a packed bag of my favorite stuffed animals shoved under my bed, one at my mother's house and one at my father's, ready to be grabbed in case of a fire or a pop-up kidnapping or the eventual and unavoidable arrival of the evil thing I knew with unreserved certainty was lurking at all times just around the corner. Hold on, I'm going to see. No. Let me see. That's too much. I want to talk to you guys. I'm going to stop right there. Yeah, let's talk. Is that okay? Does that seem like a reasonable reading? Absolutely. Okay. Thank you guys. It's like the longest that I've read from that I like to, get in, get out, but I also appreciate that all of you are here, so I don't want to
Any questions, just raise your hand or shout them out.
And if you don't ask a question, I'll just keep reading. Just kidding. Or I'll talk to you. Who knows? I mean, I'll just talk at you, which I don't want to do. I'm sure there are questions. You can also ask me about the memoir. That's fine, too. Yeah. What's your name?
I'm Joe. Joe.
Joe. Hey, Joe.
Nice to meet you. So maybe this is a weird question. You have to answer if you want to. But like, has writing like autofiction like made relationships with people weird? Like your stepdaughter, perhaps. Maybe I should say that. Your Bruce's daughter, perhaps. Do they like look at you differently now? They know that like they're in this book and they're like being described in detail.
Okay, first of all, thank you for that question. I learned this from a former student. I make so much fun. Like, my character makes fun of students in the book so much. I adore mine. I really did have a student who told me to keep it weird, and I credit her at the back of the book. She really did write a story about a mermaid that gets roasted over a spit. Great story, great student. But I also had a student who interviewed me for the memoir for LARB, and before the interview got started, she said that she had just picked this up from a professor of hers, and now I've picked it up from my former student. But she said, if I ask you anything at any point that you don't want to answer, just say, you ask too much. And I love the simplicity of that. So I offer this to all of you, because you will all write books and you will all be published, but just keep this in the back pocket. You ask too much. It's elegant. It's not mean, but you do not ask too much. Yes, this is autofiction, and I think the thing about being a writer, and I think a lot of you are already writers, and some of you are aspiring writers, and some of you are already published, but the thing about whatever you write, especially if it's fiction, just straight fiction, is that the people close to you and the people in your families will never be able to read it as straight fiction. They will always be looking for themselves, and they will always find themselves in it, whether or not they should. Often they should, right? There's the veiled mother figure. My mother could find herself in everything. My ex-husband found himself in everything, and I would just be like, that's not you. Actually, they're all me. They're all me. I'm a narcissist. I'm just like every character I've ever written is just me, 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 me. But So that said, this is my 6th book, and before the books, there were stories, and I guess I would say I have been taking great liberties with my family for decades now. So this, in some ways, feels to them like, oh, finally, you're being honest. And I think my sister loves it because she's like, I told you they were all about me. I told you. And my mother wishes that I think she would have had my father be less of, my fictional father be less of the kind of hero at the end, the turning point, the reason for an epiphany. And but there's no hard feelings that anyone has said to me. I did have to have some conversations with all of them as we were moving through the process of them reading it. My father read the book over the course of a week, and the texts at the very beginning with the first chapter were like, you're a genius, my daughter is a genius, this is brilliant. And then the texts changed to, well, that's not how I remember it. Like, literally, he wouldn't tell me what page he was on or what he was talking about. And then the text became, well, I'm glad your mother at least found me useful that one time. And then there were some down moments. And then when there were the down moments, I finally said, Dad, please, 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 you have to promise me you'll finish it. I think you're going to like the way you look at the end. Okay, like, just please finish it. And then he did finish it. And honestly, I think it was Ron Charles's review that made my dad realize that he was like, you're a brilliant world-class writer, like, you've got a huge heart and you capture all of humanity. And I was like, cool, man, like, as long as we're good, then I love it, whatever you think of me. But my stepdaughter hasn't read it, but she's read portions of it, and I tried to get her to read all of the chapters that she's in, and she got through like half of one. She's like, oh, I'm cool. And then she put it down. And I was like, do you don't want to finish? And she's like, no, I'm good. It's okay. Because it's not her. It's just an idea of her. But But so far, everything is fine. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Plus, she's already cool. I mean, like,
She's cool, right? Yeah, like she's a cool little kid. In real life, she's a cool kid. And I think what I try to do, the thing about autofiction is you have to make decisions about what your personal boundaries are and who your characters are, who the players are, and what you feel good and bad about taking, and where you feel that you have liberties and where you feel that you don't. And I equate it a lot when I teach autofiction now. And I never knew what autofiction was until my ex-husband in his debut's announcement accused me of writing autofiction. And so I was like, I need to learn what this thing is. And then I thought, this is the coolest genre ever. I didn't realize I'd been reading it for a long time because it's been around, since Sappho. Tolstoy wrote autofiction. Everyone has written autofiction. But one of the things that I tell my students, I equate how they have to figure out what they're comfortable with. It's very much like being a kid. We come out, like I think of Sartre a lot about this, no one asks to be born, but suddenly we're responsible for who we are, right? So you come out and you get put into first grade, and in first grade you get your first community of other people your age, and maybe you accidentally trip someone one day and they fall and they cry and you feel horrible. Or maybe one day you deliberately trip someone because you're a little kid and you've never tripped anyone before, so you don't really understand. So you trip them and you laugh, but then you see them and they're crying. And perhaps as a little kid, you think, I never want to do that again. I can't believe I laughed. Or perhaps you're the kid who becomes a bully in life and he sees that you're crying, but everybody else is also laughing. And that doesn't feel bad to him. It feels good. So as a writer of autofiction, I think it's a lot like that. Like it's childhood. You're feeling out and you're testing out, almost like a dog with an invisible fence. Is this a boundary I want to cross? Am I okay with this? And with regards to my family, it took my partner a long time to tell me I could write about him. And then, there was one day I had not brought it up in a while, and it was long before this book. But he just said, out of nowhere, he was like, by the way, if you ever do want to write about me, I trust you. And that was a big deal, because one of my fears in dating him was that he asked me right away that I never write about him. And I was like, okay, so we're not dating long. In my mind, I didn't say that out loud. I was like, yeah, cool. I'm definitely writing. I write about everything. I'm a writer. I write about the things that trouble me, that bother me, that confuse me. And that's like the world. That's just like on a day-to-day basis. So I just thought that we were doomed, but I liked him. So I was going to date as long as, until it was inconvenient. And then he told me that. And it was such a gift that he gave me. But I also am very delicate with children. I co-opted minimal things about the 11-year-old. And then with my sister and my brother, they both long ago told me I could do whatever I wanted. And with my mom, I always let her read everything she's in before it ever gets published, but I don't give her the whole context. And usually I do give her a glass of wine first, and then I might slip her a chapter, and I'm like, what do you think about this? And depending on the chapter, maybe I give her 2 glasses of wine first, and she always gives me permission. This book, I will say, so she read it, and she's always told me that my debut was her favorite, and about 2 years ago, I wrote it when I was 29. I said, and I am not 29 anymore. So a few years ago, I was like, Mom, you have to stop telling me that the thing that I wrote when I was 29 is the best thing that you've ever read by me. And she was like, but it's so good. And I was like, shh. I'm asking you for what I need. So when she read this book, she was like, this is my new favorite. And I was like, oh, yawn, whatever. You're just saying that. But I do really think she likes it the most. But about a month ago, she said, I'm rereading your book. And I was like, why? Once is enough. And she was like, you really get a lot more out of it the second time. And I was like, you do, but you shouldn't. Don't reread it. But we're still fine. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, in the way back, and then you. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. So you often have talked just now about taking out reactions from others read it, that she realized that she was okay and it shut the book and that was the end of it. You've also talked about boundaries. And I wanted to ask what it is that you're asking for when you ask someone to read your book. Does it have to do with, like, would a rejection have to do with you having wrongly negotiated a boundary?
Oh, okay, yeah, great question. So when actually this will clarify perhaps my character for my character, Hannah, Hannah, his character, and some of you might find this reprehensible, and that's okay. When I wanted my stepdaughter to read that one chapter because I thought it was a great, funny chapter, and it was like the day the books came in. And so I was like, oh, look, and here you are. And, she was standing across from me. So it wasn't like, please, I beg you to read it. I was like, look, because she said, is that the book that I'm in? And I said, it's the book that your fictionalized character is in. And, she flipped 2 pages and I was like, you want to finish it? And she's like, no, I'm good. So it was more about sharing with her in that moment and the excitement of it. And I personally, I didn't ever need my dad to read the book, but he had been begging for the book. And so when it finally came in, I did give it to him. And then at that point, I also didn't ask him for his feedback. The text just started. But so there's a slight difference there. With my very close family members, though, like my mom, I care about my mom, but I don't think I've crossed the line at all with anything I've done. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't have feelings that I don't want to acknowledge. But sometimes I do think, especially with autofiction and with fiction, it can lead to conversations. It has with me. It has led to conversations that have been very open and honest and perhaps a long time coming. So only one time have I ever felt like I trespassed and felt bad about it. And it was when I was in graduate school. And I'm very grateful that I did it in graduate school because I had a cohort that very lovingly, even though it was not necessarily the era of being loving towards one another in a workshop, I had taken an anecdote that a classmate of mine had told me and a bunch of other people in the workshop, but I had taken an anecdote that she told me about her husband over drinks during the weekend, something that he did. And I'd used it in a story because I thought it was like just a great detail. And when we workshopped it, she said nothing, but the class just said, this isn't yours. And it hadn't occurred to me until then that it wasn't mine to take. And I felt horrible. It's like being a kid, like in the playground. And I tripped someone. I did not mean to. I just hadn't even thought of it. Like my brain was just thinking so much about produce the art, produce the art, produce the art. And in that moment, I thought, okay, so this is not my story to tell. This is hers. And so I think a lot about that with autofiction and certainly with the memoir. In the early draft of the memoir, there are details that I was clearly just getting a lot of stuff off my chest. And there were intimate details that I had included that were not mine to include, that were my best friends. And I took them out. And it did take me a close reader, and he was the only one who read it, a very close friend. And it was just 2 instances. And he was like, it was good that you wrote it down. Now get in there and delete it. And he was absolutely right. I was just a little too close to it and couldn't see it. So I think that having those moments, though, where you do mess up are really important because the lesson lands a lot more solidly. Like parents are always trying to teach lessons to their kids in advance of, they practice bleeding in advance for them, like put the Band-Aid on, but the kid needs to experience it to figure out, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. You had Bartlett, yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm a writer.
You're a writer?
Yeah.
That's your name? Oh, that's great. It sounds like writer.
It
Yeah,
does.
okay.
So you use humor a lot in your work, and you use it in a way that contextualizes and emphasizes the more serious moments. How do you approach the balance of being I guess, like witty and humorous with that sometimes like sensitive subject matter?
Thank you for that diagnosis of what I am doing. Like, that is exactly what I want to do. And even though they let me teach, I do not always know what I am doing. I am very good at diagnosing other people's work and helping them find out how to hone what they're after. When I was younger, and by younger I mean like teens into my 20s, into even my early 30s, I grew up in a pretty patriarchal, even conservative household. And I definitely thought that women were silly and girls were sillier. And so I made myself a tomboy early on, and I thought, I will not be feminine. I will not crave prettiness. I will be serious because that is the way to be taken seriously. You have to be serious to be taken seriously. And a lot of things happened for me in my 30s, but one of the best things that happened was my divorce, because on the other side of my divorce, I had to figure out a lot of things, one of which was, how did I get myself into this mess? And why did I get myself into this mess when I knew I didn't want to marry him in the first place? But I did. And so on the other side of it, one of the best things that happened was I realized you do not have to be serious to be taken seriously. In fact, just because you are serious does not mean you will be taken seriously. And just because you're funny doesn't mean you aren't serious or profound. And I realized that I had constructed so much of a kind of working daily persona in order to navigate what I thought society was telling me I had to be, and I was bucking certain things and navigating certain things. So I think there was this sort of liberty that I experienced. And once I realized that I was allowed to be funny, and that I wanted to be funny, and that I didn't care whether or not I could be taken seriously, I think that kind of freedom started to infect my writing. So my first book is about a girl who goes missing, and it's very serious, like very serious. And when I was on book tour, I would get there, I'd show up, and one of the things, the overwhelming commentary or the feedback would always be like, your book is so serious, but you're so funny. And I'd say, yes, I'm funny. And I decided to try to write a funny book for my follow-up. And of course, my funny book it begins with a suicide, and it's about debt and infidelity, but it is quite funny. But it really wasn't until, I think, the memoir that I realized humor and grief and sadness, they kind of go hand in hand. And as the title sort of alludes to, I'm somebody who thinks a lot about what makes life profound and what makes life absurd, because I do think life is absolutely absurd. And I also think it's incredibly profound. And the intersecting line for me, the thing that I have found between life's absurdity and life's profundity, is its brevity. That we only get like a very short amount of time. And that is ridiculous to me, but it is also what makes it special, right? If we were all Edward Enter the Twilight guy, whatever. Does he even have a last name? Oh, he does. Okay, that guy. Like, life would seem pretty boring to me. I guess he found a humanoid, and that made it interesting for that like tiny epic. So I think a lot about that. I don't know how I do it, but I love humor and I love darkness. I do know that when I started writing this book, when I sold it to my editor, and I sold it to her with only maybe 60 pages, it was very much the Arrested Development 60 pages that was just about the family comedy. And when I turned it in, 300 pages later, she was not happy with me. She was like, oh, there's a darkness. And I said, yes, there is a darkness. There is a total darkness, because with comedy, there is darkness because this is life. And she said, well, we're really thinking more about Arrested Development here. Like, we want you to bring out the family more. And I was like, well, I don't. The Irishman really upset her, and the narrator's sort of grappling with, was I assaulted, was I not assaulted? If I can have this relationship now with this man from my past, it will mean maybe I wasn't assaulted. She was like, that's just not a beach read. And I was like, yes, it is not a beach read. That is right. So she never liked it. And basically we were going to pull it. We didn't pull it. They ended up publishing it. And I think she thought she did not trust readers to get on board with having these two, having joy and terror and grief and happiness all in one package. She didn't trust readers. And I was like, I actually think that there are a lot more people out there who like the momentum, the high and the low. I will say this as well. I don't know how to plot. This is, sorry in advance for the people in the workshop tomorrow. Plot is not my strength, but I do know how I think when I'm successful, which is not always, to keep a reader turning the page. And part of that is about momentum. And for me, I create momentum by unexpected juxtapositions. So that I have this chapter that is, family, funny, but also a darkness. I have confessions I'm trying to confess. And then the very second chapter is, here is a confession. And this woman confesses to adultery in the second chapter, which I also thought was, well, that'll be fun. Like in comparison to my memoir, that'll just like make people go, what? Do we judge her now? And it is fiction, by the way. So I just thought that was right. Like I cannot necessarily plot, but I can put dark next to light, next to dark, next to light. I'm very interested, especially at the line level, in polarity. Like The Colonel by Carolyn Forche is a poem that I love to teach, where you show how just on every single sentence there's a word that's darkness, there's a word that's lightness, and it's just, there's a word that suggests, denotes happiness and wealth, and then there's a word that denotes fear and terror, and that keeps the poem moving. Where are we on time?
I think we've got time for another maybe one, maybe two questions.
Yes, hello.
Yes, what was the genesis for needing to tell this story when you needed to tell it?
Thank you for asking. So again, thinking of me as a person who writes what confuses her and bothers her and what she's thinking about. I had recently turned 40, I moved in with a man, bought a house, had not lived with him, had not been a step parent at all. Literally like the day before COVID shut the world down. And so all of a sudden I found myself at 40 something, maybe 40. I think it was when I turned 40. I was suddenly a stepmother. I was suddenly a third grade teacher. I was trapped in a house with two people that I barely, it turns out, knew, right? Because I hadn't even lived with him. And I was like, what have I done with my life? And why am I here? And what is going on? And why is there a child? And why? And then add to that also just getting older, and like your students stop saying things like, you look just like one of us. We didn't even know you were the teacher, which happened for the first 10 years. And you're so annoyed. Like, no, I don't look just like you. And then you're like, please, like card me, tell me I look like you, right? Like I promise. And they don't. They're like, no, you're the teacher. We can tell, we can spot you a mile away, until they can't spot you at all anymore because you're invisible. And so I was thinking about a lot of that, and I didn't know how to write about it. I ended up writing the memoir during COVID, but I was still thinking about all of like the things about middle age and invisibility and desire and where does it go, and trauma and where does that go. And I was thinking about things that happened to me in grad school and wondering, was I assaulted? I still don't know. And that's something that I've been trying to write about for a long time. And then in 2022, I got an email from my agent, and she said, have you seen this? And of course she put it in the subject line, which is how my agent communicates with me, via subject. And there was a screenshot of my ex-husband's debut, and I read it. And I thought it was a memoir. And my memoir, we were just about to announce my memoir. And I was just like, oh, he's written a memoir too? And I sent the screenshot, and I was in a tiz because it says his ex-wife is about to publish a work of autofiction. So I was in a tiz for a million reasons. I was like, I didn't write autofiction. I wrote a memoir. oh my gosh, like what is this going to do? Like, how am I going to seem? This seems really weird. And then I sent the screenshot to my friend Ada, and I will go ahead and say that's Ada Limon because she comes off really funny in this. I was like, can you believe this guy? And she was like, oh, honey, it's not a memoir, it's a novel. And I was like, no, it is a memoir because it's our life. It's like literally he has an affair with her best friend and like gives up teaching. And she said, it's a novel, honey. And I was like, he can't write a novel about me. And that actually led me to thinking about appropriation and boundaries and what I steal from life and what I don't steal from life. And it really gave me something to think about. I have borrowed from my own life and from my friends and from my family without thinking, except, in cases where I made decisions. That's not my story, but I just have baldly and boldly stolen. And as many fiction writers have. I mean, Lauren Groff writes beautifully about this. Anyway, I was thinking about that. And then in Googling him, which I really did for the first time in like 6 or 7 years, I did find a story. This was all on the same day that I found out about his debut. I found the story. It was a really good story. And there is a person just like me. She's gone up for tenure in the same way. She's with a man who may or may not be bald, but used to be chair of the English department, who's got a daughter. I mean, like, check, right? It's my life, and it's him too. Like, he's got a new wife. She's my former best friend. It's us that he's written about in this perfectly contained little story. And I read it with great interest. And then I got to the part where I was knifed to death by a homeless man, and I was like, what? What? And it was and then I looked at when he published it, and I was like, but we were still colleagues. And then I thought, but why didn't he announce this on the English like listserv? And I was like, oh, because he murdered me. Oh yeah, I can see how my colleagues would have thought. And I was like, what do I think about this? And unlike in the book, I immediately told my boyfriend. He was sitting across from me, and he was like, I said, son of a bitch murdered me 3 years ago. And my boyfriend did not like it. He was just like, that is not cool. And I said, do you want to read it? And he goes, nah, I'm good. And then I called my sister and I was like, he murdered me. And she's like, that's funny. And then I called Ada, and Ada was just like, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. And I said, he's fine. Like, he's not going to hurt me. But it was that very same day that I just sat down, and so I didn't know that this would be the medium for what I was writing about, but all of the other stuff was stuff that I had been thinking about and that I knew I wanted to write about. Thank you for asking that, by the way. One more question?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, there isn't. Oh, there is. Yeah. Hi.
So outside of autofiction, how much do you think yourself kind of creeps into the things you write without your knowledge? And how much of that do you think the people that read your books that do know you personally can catch on to?
So I think there are a lot of different ways. I think different writers will tell you vastly different things, but I have thought a lot about this, and I am unable to write anything without it filtering through me, right? So my interests are my interests, and my anxieties are my anxieties. So even if I'm writing a book about a plane crash in 1962 in Atlanta, my anxieties are going to bleed through into that. When I was writing that book, I did write a book that takes place in 1962 in Atlanta, and I researched it a great deal. It was about a real crash that happened in Atlanta while my parents were alive. But it was right after my husband had had an affair. And so the lead character is a man who is having an affair with a young woman who dies on the plane crash. So that one anxiety was bleeding through from my life. And I became a person who was thinking a lot about infidelity, and I had not thought a lot about infidelity prior to that. But I also think it sneaks up. I like being surprised as a writer. I like not having a sense of where I'm going, so it leaves me open to things that I haven't expected infiltrating the narrative, and it goes in strange and different places. So I think, for instance, my second book, which is the one about infidelity, suicide, and debt, it wasn't about debt. Debt wasn't in the book at first. It was about these 3 siblings, and one of the siblings is the horrible narrator. And she's cheated on her husband. her father, who she's estranged from, has just committed suicide, and she's in Atlanta for the funeral with her older siblings, both of whom are wildly more successful. And my editor bought that book, and she said, after she bought it, I was like, excellent, done. You know, I did NaNoWriMo. I wrote it in 1 month, kind of like sat down and I was like, haha, I wrote a book in a month. And she was like, after she bought it, she said, but there's something missing. And I said, okay, cool, just tell me what it is. And I'll like insert, like carrot it right in. And she said, well, I don't know what it is, but there's something missing. And this is just about the anxieties and the way that things filter in. So the older siblings are wildly successful, and the narrator covets everything right and left. She covets their furniture. She covets this. The one thing that wasn't there was just the explicitly saying money and debt. And the thing that was happening in my real life was that during graduate school, I'd managed to get myself into like, I want to say $40,000 worth of debt. Credit card debt, paying for like various boys that I dated, one of whom became my husband. And so that anxiety of money was clearly there while I was writing the book. And once I realized that it was debt that was missing, it's almost as though a version of me, like subconsciously, had left these perfect places open in the narrative. It was the easiest thing I've ever done to go in and be like, yes, here's where I'm actually talking about money, but I'm just talking about furniture. So I put in the money. You know, here's where she goes to the grocery store, but she can't, you know, like do something. It's because she can't pay. And it just became so profoundly easy to see that I was just not allowing that anxiety in, but that was the thing that filled out the book and made it, you know, from like 8 pie slices into 9 or however many slices are in a pie. I don't know. I don't bake pie. I don't 6. Like there was a 5 pie slice to a 6 pie slice. But does that kind of? And then how much do like family or friends? It doesn't matter. Again, back to the very first question: how much you are or aren't in your book. People close to you are going to find you in it. They're going to think it's you, and the best you can hope for is that they'll actually verbalize it. And they'll say, so this is how you feel? Like my mom, when she finished it the second time, she came over and she said, she made sure that Bruce wasn't home. And she said, so you're unhappy? And I said, no, I'm profoundly happy. I'm like wildly happy. But part of what allows me to be wildly happy is that I get to write in a persona that is incongruous and not complementary to the life I've chosen. I have chosen domesticity. Do I still chafe against it? 100%. But part of what I have figured out is I am much more comfortable with it now that I have like this that I've done, where I got to sort of beat up a lot of people I care deeply about, myself most, just to give everyone a really hard time. It made me like so much lighter and more loving just to put out some animosity into the world and like anger, you know? So, but I think my mom probably still thinks I'm unhappy, but I can't control that, you know? She still comes over all the time and we laugh a lot, but probably in her heart of hearts, she's like, does my daughter want this life? I mean, does anybody want, I mean, like we all, whatever, like, blah, blah, blah. That's going to be caught on tape too. So that's amazing. Okay, thank you. Let's give our guest. Thank you guys so much for being here.